Number 1. People turn batshit crazy and creepy as hell when they get really sick. There's even a term called ICU psychosis, and trust me, it's real. Anyway, the creepiest that takes the cake for me is this. I'm an ICU nurse, by the way. Had a patient who was admitted for overdose. Very long history of mental health problems. She was thrashing around in bed, very combative, kicking people's asses for days, totally incoherent. Well, the night I had her, she started making decent sense, but still not oriented at all. She was extremely paranoid and kept talking about the man in black in the corner. I'd hear her talking to him and screaming all night long. So I'd go in there and try to calm her down, but you could see the fear in her eyes. She was talking other nonsense about how she was in space and shit, and with certain patients you try to redirect their reality. But what I didn't help her. She said, "That man in black, don't you see him?" and pointed to the corner. I said, "There's nobody there." I stepped in the corner she was pointing to and waved my hands around. While I'm waving my hands around in the air, she had the most horrifically terrified look on her face that actually scared the shit out of me, like I had just assaulted the man in black. I said, "See, there's nobody here." And she said in a matter-of-factly, "You stupid dumb bitch way, that's what you think." I promptly got the fuck out of there. Number 2. Nothing I can say can possibly describe the year I worked in psychiatric intensive care. There was a woman that came in and sat down across the table from me for her admission interview. She had bandages all over her arms and scotch tape over her mouth and ears. She looked very uncomfortable and wouldn't really sit still. When the nurse would ask her a question, she would peel the corner of the tape back and answer, then stick the tape back on really fast. We eventually found out that she saw and felt bugs crawling all over her, and they were trying to get inside her body. The tape was to keep the bugs out. The bandages were because some bugs got in and she had to dig them out. She couldn't sit still because she felt the bugs all over her even while we sat and talked. The worst part was, she had some idea that it was her mind playing tricks on her. Can you imagine going through your life feeling like someone is continuously dumping buckets of cockroaches on your head? Feeling like they're all over you, getting inside of you to the point that you're digging chunks out of your flesh in a panic, all while knowing intellectually that none of it is real? Another story. A girl spent my entire 8-hour shift fist-fighting the same ghost. She would throw a few punches and obviously landed knockout blows, so she'd bend over and twist her hand like she was wrapping some long hair around her wrist. She'd drag her opponent down the hallway, give a few good kicks, and then set up for a curb stomp. Starts off kind of funny, then it gets a little disturbing when you think about the graphic things going on in her mind. Then just sad after you watch this replay for hours on end. Number 3. Paramedic checking in. A few years ago, I responded to a call for a pregnant female who shot herself. The 911 caller hung up before any more information could be gathered by dispatch. We arrived to find a girl in her early to mid-20s sitting on the bathroom floor, leaning against the front of the bathtub, slumped over. She was obviously pregnant, looked to be in her 3rd trimester to me. She was unresponsive and barely breathing, with a rapid carotid pulse. A small revolver was on the floor next to her. We found a single gunshot wound to the center of her very pregnant abdomen. The patient's mother and 4-year-old son were on the scene. The mother told us that the patient invited her over for dinner for some company, as she had been fighting with the father of her fetus all day long. The mother stated that in the middle of dinner, the patient excused herself from the table to use the bathroom. That's when the mother heard a single gunshot. Anyway, the mother told us that the patient was 23 and was almost full term. To make a long story short, we intubated the patient, established 2 IVs, carry her down the 2nd floor to the truck, and haul ass to the trauma center. The patient went into cardiac arrest as we were wheeling her into the hospital. CPR was started and an emergency C-section was performed in the ER, but both the mom and the baby died. The bullet went through the baby and through the mom's abdominal aorta. Her belly was full of blood. Fucked up call. Number 4. As a tech in psych years ago, there was a 7-year-old kid sent to the floor because the mom didn't know what to do with him. Sadly, it's a common thing to happen, even if the kids don't have psych issues. Anyway, the mom was shaking and crying, and they had to take the kid into another room. She was genuinely afraid of her own son. She had suspected something was wrong when she kept finding mutilated animals in the backyard, but never heard or saw coyotes or anything around. The neighbor's smaller pets started disappearing. The boy had an obsession with knives, hiding them around the house, denying anything when the mom confronted him. Then when the two started getting into arguments, he would get really violent and hit her, push her down and kick her, threaten to kill her. On multiple occasions she woke up in the middle of the night with him standing beside her bed, staring her in the face. She put extra locks on her bedroom door to feel safe while she slept. The last straw was when she lifted up his mattress and found more than 50 knives of all shapes and sizes under there. So she brought him to us. I remember talking to him, treating him like he was just any other kid that came through. He seemed remarkably normal until you spoke directly to him. He had this way of looking right through you, or maybe like he didn't see you at all while you were speaking. He would respond like a robot, like he was just saying words because that's what we wanted to hear. And he would always put on this creepy, dead-looking smile, like all mouth and no eye movement involved in the smile, especially when he would get away with something, like taking another kid's markers and they couldn't figure it out. Still gives me the chills laying here thinking about him. I had to get up and close my bedroom door. I believe I met a 7-year-old psychopath. Number 5, paramedic here. We got a call to go out to a scene for an elderly woman with chest pains. Arrive at the house, and the front door is open. We knock, hear the old woman calling out from the back, "I'm in the back room," in a very monotone and calm voice. My partner and I go to the back of the house looking for this woman, and that's when we smelled it. Nothing prepares you for the smell of rotting corpse. I've smelled it a dozen times, and it never gets any less disturbing. We radio for police and ALS backup as we move through the house. We open the door to the master bedroom, and there is our patient. She is approximately 80, and she is staring at the master bathroom with these cold, dead eyes. She never once looked at us as we approached her and began talking to her. I got to the bedside and got in front of her gaze, and she just looked right through me. I turned around to see what she could possibly be looking at, and there was the source of the smell. A man about the same age as my patient is on the floor, with very little left of his head still attached to his body. A shotgun lay on the floor next to him, and most of his head was strewn about the walls and bathroom counter. He shot himself. We loaded the woman up in the ambulance, and our police backup pulled up. I don't think this woman blinked once the entire time she was in our care. I think she couldn't even grasp what was going on. Totally fucked me up. Number 6. I work with geriatric patients, and there was an incident about 3 years ago. Before I explain, let me say I don't believe in ghosts. Anyway, this one time I was working the night shift, and I was super sleepy, so I decided to skip lunch because I wasn't hungry, and go to my car and sleep for 30 minutes. I got inside my car, covered myself up with my sweater, set the timer on my phone, and immediately knocked out. I'm dreaming, but in my dream I'm still awake, just sitting there. Someone taps on my car window, and it's one of my patients. We'll call her Jane. Surprised, I ask Jane what the hell she's doing outside, and she tells me she is looking for her daughter. I tell her to go back inside, and we will call her daughter in the morning. My patient becomes angry and starts banging on my car window. I kind of freak out and try to reach for the door handle to get out and calm her down, but I quickly realize I can't move. Let me add that I frequently experience sleep paralysis, so even though I am asleep, I realize what is happening. I fight it and try squirming my body in an attempt to wake myself up. I finally manage to wake up and my heart is racing. My forehead is a bit sweaty. I sit there for a minute, realize it was all a dream, and roll the window down to cool myself off. My break is over, and I clock back in and see that my supervisor and 2 other nurses are huddled in front of a room. I am still by the station clocking in when they see me and call me over. I walk over thinking maybe something was wrong with the ventilator, or that a patient fell, but my supervisor tells me that Jane died while I was on my lunch break. Since most of our patients are do not resuscitate, I was not paged. Took a couple of seconds for the message to register, and I freaked out internally. I got goosebumps, but didn't mention anything to my supervisor about the dream. I don't believe in ghosts or anything like that, and I most likely had that dream because she was the last patient I interacted with before I went on my break. So she was still on my mind, and I was mentally going over my patient's charts in my head. At least, that's what I think. Number 7. I was a new nurse at our hospital and only been working there a couple of months. I brought a patient of mine up to day surgery from the ER for an endoscopy, and they called back down and asked me to bring her family up because she only spoke Italian and not enough English, and they needed someone to consent for the procedure. After dropping them off, I walked past the waiting room to head back down the hall to the elevators. I took the back way to get to the ER, and the hallways are all deserted. It used to be the pediatric wing of the hospital, but it's been shut down for years, and the rooms are just empty and full of broken equipment and beds and crap. As I reached the old nurses' station at the T-junction between the pediatric hallway and the hallway that goes to the elevators, I saw a little girl standing across from the nurse's station further down the hall. She had big pigtails and was wearing a brown dress, white shoes, and holding a teddy bear. I thought perhaps she was a family member who'd walked away from the day surgery waiting room. I was concerned that she would go into one of the rooms and get hurt or lost. So I said, "Hey, little girl, what are you doing? You don't need to be over there, you're going to get hurt." And I walked around the nursing station to go and grab her hand and bring her back. I shit you not, she vanished as I got about 15 feet away from her. Every hair on my body stood up straight, and I turned and ran like a bat out of hell down to the elevator. I pounded that button for what seemed like an eternity until the elevator got to the floor. As I got back to the ER, I walked to the nurses' station, white as a sheet, and one of the older nurses looked at me and said, "Jesus Christ, what's wrong with you?" I remember babbling like an idiot as I tried to tell them what happened. After listening to me for a moment or two, the nurse said, "Oh, you saw the little ghost girl. She's been around here for years." And I remember saying, "Well, thanks for telling me about this." Apparently the ghost has been seen in the ER ducking in and out of patients' rooms and peeking around curtains. My wife worked up on the 7th floor, and she said that one time on nights a whole row of patient rooms started yelling about a little girl that was running around in their rooms. Number 8. I had cared for an elderly woman with no family who came to us when her husband died. She didn't speak often, but when she did, it was usually just words that made no sense together. I felt so bad for her because ever since she had arrived, so many of the patients in her area that she seemed to enjoy spending time with had passed on in such a short time span. She put up a picture of each of them next to her pictures of her husband and several others, who were probably family, to remember them. I had always felt sorry for her and showed extra attention, and we became close. It just seemed so unfair that she had such luck and kept losing people that she cared about. One day she looked at me and said plain as day, "Sweetie, I think I'm done now." And she handed me a picture. It was a picture of me, and I smiled because it touched my heart that I was that important to her. She passed nearly a week later, and I cried for days. It hit me really hard. She knew it was the end for her and said goodbyes as best she could. Well, a little less than 2 years later, I was talking with a colleague, and the old woman came up in conversation. My colleague referred to her as "that crazy bitch," which seemed very out of character for her, and it shocked and offended me deeply. I expressed this to her, and not so nicely, and she looked at me with a shocked look and said, "Oh dear, do you not know?" and then explained something to me that I hadn't known. As it turned out, it had come out some time after she passed that she had killed her husband by poisoning him, and that there was an investigation because it appeared that she had a ritual of befriending someone, obtaining a picture of them, and hiding the picture until she could kill them, usually by poisoning, and then displaying the picture as a sort of trophy. It was suspected that this may have been the reason for the spike in mortality rate during her stay, and the considerable number of photos in her, well, let's just say, collection. The last I heard, the old family photos weren't any relation to her at all, and the police were trying to ID those individuals and compare them to several cold cases they had. Thank you for listening to my video. I will have another one soon with more creepy and spooky stories for you. If you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe, and I will see you later.